Welcome back to the WeMaple Video Show. Today we're joined with filmmaker, director, writer, father, entrepreneur, friend, mine, colleague, Michael Peterson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Our token of gratitude was a jugo.
Yeah, proteins and fruits and veggies. You're keeping me alive.
Oh, nice. That's excellent. Is that going to help with the writing?
Probably not.
We were just chatting a bit about mentorship and the kind of spirit behind that. Why do you think that that's important for our industry?
For film, I mean, you can learn all sorts of things from, books and watching movies and art. But to learn how to make it, the only way to really do that is by doing it. And it's very daunting, especially on sort of the producing side. It tends to be like a lonely venture. So to learn how to get those skills, you kind of have to go through it a bunch of times. And it's much better if you go through it with a little bit of assistance or mentorship, so you don't have to make all the mistakes on your own first time. Learn the easy way and not just the hard way.
What's one of your most painful mistakes you've had in your filmmaking career?
Probably just choosing to have a filmmaking career. Pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Consistently painful and existential crises. Yeah.
And then yet it's the thing that you love most, is storytelling and filmmaking, and so it's this kind of weird paradox almost.
Yeah, it's like an affliction, kind of, is how I often think of it. Or a curse or something like that. But you got to do it. So what else are you going to do? So you might as well figure out how you can do it in the way that works best for you.
And what is that way for you?
For me, it's being involved creatively with projects, typically also financing, and seeing it from sort of development through to where it ends up being distributed and sold. We're following projects all the way through, working with the other partners on the project all the way through. That's mostly what makes it, that's kind of what makes it meaningful for me. Both as a producer, I do some directing and I do some producing. And when I first started out, those things felt like they were in conflict with one another. And then over time, it felt like they, reached hands across the aisle and learned how to work together. And I think eventually and ultimately, they inform one another in a way that becomes a strength. I think it also allows me to work with other creatives in that way. But anyway, it's sort of the entire creative process. I don't want to walk into a project and sort of be a manager, typically. That's not really my interest. Making cool Canadian projects.
Do you remember one of your first?
That I made?
Yeah.
In grade 7 or 8. I made a video presentation of Rasputin. But we sort of made him more like a superhero, so he's just an unkillable person. And that was our presentation for social studies class in grade 7 or 8.
And that initial kind of passion that you discovered for filmmaking, what sort of circumstances were created for you in order to discover that for yourself? Was it because you enrolled in the program? Did you have a handy cam at home under the Christmas tree that you started picking up to film, or where did it initially kind of start?
It didn't start with that. It started with going to the movies. So there was I grew up in a family with 5 kids, and then my parents didn't want a TV for a number of years while we were growing up, but they did love going to the movies. So we'd go to the movies 2 times a week, 3 times a week sometimes. It was often we'd hit Tuesday or Wednesday and we were waiting for Friday because we'd seen everything in the theater. And we'd go see stuff twice, 3 times sometimes. Or I would anyways, because we used to sneak in or stay in longer for the second movie. So you'd watch 2 movies, 2 for 1 pricing, without them knowing.
Nice.
So it probably started there.
Statute of limitations.
That's right. I was a young offender, So it probably started with that. And then I always figured I'd be just a writer and not probably get into sort of the more the technical side. Yeah.
We worked together on a series of projects.
Mm-hmm.
The most notable that always stands out as a really excellent piece of writing was the script for Ever's Harmony video, and the idea that the notes on a musical scale represent the harmony of the universe. Do you remember writing those words?
I sure do. So the kind of writing I used to, like when I was in high school and university, the kind of I did a lot of cultural journalism. I wrote a lot of like music reviews, film reviews, band interviews, things like that. I don't know if I was particularly good at it, but that's what I was doing. And I did that for a bunch of newspapers in a bunch of different places. So music has always been sort of a real passion of mine, not as someone who can play it because I have no musical ability whatsoever. I took a guitar once and it took me like a month to learn Lovely Tender. Like I just don't have that skill. So when I was doing my master's degree, I was either going to do it in music, focus it on music, and that was in like cultural studies, communication studies. I was going to focus it on either music or film. So at the very last minute, I pivoted and did it about documentary. But music has always been sort of a real strong interest of mine. That's like a cultural, as a cultural thing, just as a fan of music, trying to hear new cool stuff. And one of the things that I read, because I sometimes read obscure books about music and the theory of music as a cultural phenomenon. Sounds pretty wanky, but one of those things was talking about how in the Chinese musical scale, it was sort of a representational system of the harmony of the universe. I think similar to sort of in ancient Greece when they talked about ideal objects and ideal shapes or forms. Same thing. So there's a higher level of this thing, and you're always trying to attain this sort of harmony of the universe. So if that stuff is out of harmony, it's actually representative of a sort of a bigger problem in the universe. Anyway, it gets metaphysical, but it's just an idea that always kind of carried with me, that it was sort of like this was sort of somehow a transmitter or a receiver for, the shape that we're in.
That was a very fitting metaphor in that piece of work.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool that to be able to use this kind of weird knowledge that you pick up over time. These things that are just, the obscure, I guess, at best. To be able to use that in sort of your work later on is pretty cool. That was probably 20 years ago I read whatever that was, wherever I pulled that from.
Something that stuck with me about that production day too was, the heat in the desert that you found in Alberta.
Yeah.
And someone's almost full-time job that day with the air sprayer for the goggles, and how critical those goggles on that moment were. And they were there getting the right amount of dust and dirt on the lenses of the goggles. And it was an expression to me of what care and love you have for your craft, that someone was there with the thing to blow air to get the right amount of dust on goggles.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the details that kill you. So if you're watching a movie and like, I don't know, like a bad example would be, the scientist in the movie is played by a woman and she's wearing high heels and then she has to run. Like, it's just like these details become really important with however they play out through whatever the narrative is. And lots of times stuff is written in a way that either excludes those details, so you have a conversation, you don't think of the repercussions. So there's sort of a practical level to it. And then there's sort of the artistic level. And those two things sort of travel the same path, because if you can't do it practically, it doesn't really matter if it works artistically necessarily. So it becomes really important. And those little things will kill you on a shoot. Again, sort of pragmatic level. Or if you don't have that stuff, then you're figuring out how to do it, and then you added a half an hour to your day because you didn't think of these details in terms of how they're going to be executed and what's important. Yeah.
That led to us.
Yeah, that was fun, that project.
Yeah, it was. It was very well received too. It premiered on Rolling Stone online, and it was memorable and notable forever. It worked absolutely exactly perfect in the way in which it was designed. Then as we carried on in that collaboration, we took that idea of the obelisk or monolith, and we continued with this structure that sort of represents new ideas. There's a famous scene in 2001 Space Odyssey with the monkeys, of course, when this monolith appears and they discover something new. And it's also very representative of Ever, because their system is entirely subsurface, and so having something above ground that's interesting. And we sent you on various excursions to do more art with that obelisk. The desert in California, you went to Brussels and Belgium, and we executed on some interesting marketing. And I'm curious on whether you took that granular care to those types of projects too, that you do to all of your projects. You know, when it's like, hey, next month, do you want to go fly over to Belgium and set up an obelisk and film some people in the street? Hey, do you want to go to? And it was very kind of rushed in nature. It felt that way. So where's that line for you? You used a great analogy of the hand going across the aisle, where producing and directing work in tandem. But how do you kind of manage, like, I have to do this thing by this certain period of time and make good art?
Yeah, those ones were a little different because they were less scripted. So you're sort of approaching them a little bit more documentary style, which tends to mean you can go in with your ideas, but at some point, you know, without sort of a team that you have on a scripted scenario, you don't control sort of all the outcomes in the same way. So that one, you're treating it with a little bit more improvisation and documentary. So you're looking for some opportunities in a different way. You're controlling it as much as you can, but you can't control everything just based on the way they were set up. And there was a little bit less of a narrative drive in terms of the overall pieces. So I was treating those a little bit more in a documentary way, where I'm setting up the event and then sort of discovering some of the things, because we didn't know everything that was going to sort of pop up. And then making it work the best we can, and fighting for the things that you think are there to sort of work beyond whatever your original concept is that may or may not completely match with what you end up with. Does that make sense?
It does. And it was also reminding me that there's all those assets that exist. We had those actors show up on site, be there at the obelisk, some time travelers, or this narrative that was sort of created around that. Right. Do you remember any of those details of what was shot?
Not exactly, no.
I do have that footage, though. Reminder, find that footage. Yeah, that's really cool. You know, leading into this morning, I was thinking about stories. There's this book that talks about stories being memorable in the context of sales and selling. And that's fundamentally what I'm hearing of your career in the writing side of things, and what, you know, is needed is good writing to produce a good story. What have you written in the last year that you're quite proud of?
Me? Nothing. Nothing that I'm not proud of, but just I haven't written anything.
You've been producing mode?
I've been producing and directing. And those just take up so much time that it's the writing skill and time that I would have, I just don't have time to spend a month or two kind of writing a script, because I'm too busy doing the other stuff, which is good news. But hopefully that what that does allow me to do is, when I am working on a project, to give good feedback and good notes to support that narrative and push and pull it in the right ways to hopefully make it different.
Yeah, we're in a part of the world here in Alberta. You know, we've got a fantastic government incentive program. The federal government of Canada is a great supporter of film. What have you seen in your kind of career over the last couple of decades of how that landscape has changed?
Yeah. I'll try to think of a way to say this without getting too boring into the weeds.
Tell it as a story, Mike.
It's not a very good one, or not a very exciting one. In general, they changed what they're calling the tax credit now. They changed it in a way that before it just used to be one program, but then they adjusted it so it's two programs. So there's sort of an Alberta specific one that's run through, I think, the Arts and Culture Department, and that's set up as a grant at 25%, and that's only for projects $500,000 and under. There is a clause in that that's a little bit worrisome that talks about them having some say over content, and this is outside of sort of the general parameters of what content is acceptable. This is like specific content as to what they can or can't approve. They do have that ability in the way that the language is set up, and I've heard rumors that projects have been turned down, possibly for content-related reasons because they didn't line up with whatever the government thought was an appropriate subject to be speaking about that may relate to big industry. The other one is projects $500,000 and over. That's typically where I'm playing, and that is set up now as a tax credit, but it is an all spend. They changed it so basically it runs through the industry minister. I believe it's through the industry minister, but it's separate from the $500,000 and under one. And they've set it up so it really doesn't favor local producers, and it's building it in a way that's sort of setting up service producing to be on par with local producers, which I would suggest. Those are usually bigger, more high-profile projects because they're typically American studio type shows, TV series or movies. So they're probably great for publicity and they're good for the general community, but part of sort of the ecosystem that exists with the local shows. Often we're training the crews or providing opportunities for crews to upgrade positions so that when those other shows come, we have a really good, strong, capable crew base, which we do have, but those projects that we make here tend to be part of that process. And I personally think they should just have it as one system and not have a separate one for Alberta and change the tax rates and add different offices to have more administration, which I think would fall in line with their cutting red tape statements. I just haven't seen that. I've seen it sort of be increased a little bit. But it should be in a place that sort of advantages local producers and doesn't disadvantage them. Because if you're making a show here, like a fundamental difference, a couple of them would be one, if it's a locally produced show, that means we're involved in creating the content. We're working in the positions above the line, which are like directors, writers, producers. We're usually taking the financial risk on the project, so there's a lot at stake. And if you're doing a service show, my understanding is you're not doing any of the financial risk taking and you're not involved creatively in a meaningful way. So they're very different that way, even though you're just making a movie. They're fundamentally different, and the skill sets and sort of the development that is an outcome of those things, I think, is different between the two types of projects. So if we're taking more risk and we're helping build the base that's being used by the other group, it seems to me we should give the advantage to the locally produced shows rather than put them on par or create disadvantages. Put them on par with the service productions. Are you asleep yet?
This is my world too. I love this. I could talk about this for another hour and a half.
Well, it's surprising to me how, in my experience, how few people actually understand how these things work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And there's they've done great publicity to talk about how, in general, things are better here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would completely agree with that statement as a local producer. We've lost some local producers when they froze the program for about a year. A bunch of people left the province. I was almost one of them. It came really close. It was scary because it's like, you can't operate here with that level of unpredictability.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, like, literally just not functioning at all. And then there's been a few other things which hopefully they can get over some of those administration type of hiccups.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me like a good thing to have a diverse industry within the industry, so that you're not 100% reliant on the one type of show, which during the SAG strike, which had an impact across Canada to be sure, but places that have a higher service production model as their main component, those places were shut down. Places that had some, local producers also making stuff were able to still function somewhat. So there was two movies that we made. One, for part of it, there was nothing else shooting because everything else was a service production. The other movie that we made was also during that time. It's a Canadian show. And there was nothing else shooting because all the service stuff was shut down. So anyways, it feels like there's a lot of good reasons to promote and make sure that we have strong local producers making stuff here.
And pretty massive, pretty massive local impact when those big shows come in and produce Ghostbusters, Last of Us, these big productions. What that does for the local economy is good. All those local small businesses.
Yeah.
Fargo was another one that was really good.
Yeah, it is good. It's just it's short-term goal setting, right? So a show comes here, they shoot here, great. There's a lot of benefits, but the long-term impacts of that are probably, I would guess, negligible. If I'm here as a producer making stuff, I'm not gonna make one movie here and then make the next 5 projects in 5 different jurisdictions. The majority of the stuff I'm making is going to make here because this is where I live and this is where I work. So there's a whole bunch of things that come out of that. In my opinion, like the types of relationships I need to create, the culture that I need to sort of hopefully create on set, so that you have, these relationships that you can return to over and over again. Is one thing, and then just not being reliant on an outside party for all the creative stuff we can build. I can make the decisions to help build scenarios for creating, new producers, new writers, new directors, people that are above the line and aren't often given, almost never given those opportunities on the service shows. Like, how do you build that stuff if we don't have the shows here where we control sort of those creative and above the line type decisions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do. You'd mentioned around the training and mentorship. That's a component of a subcategory through that provincial funding stream, and we view that as something critical here to Business on Camera and what we're doing in WeMaple. That our staff, those relationships, that they get tooled up and equipped up to do more than just be a writer, do more than just be a director, and get close to all aspects of that process, so that that brings more value to the productions and the content. And then that's like another kind of principle, I guess, that I'm coming to learn, is how important it is to invest in people. That when people are doing their career in a certain adjacent sector or directly related sector, if you have the kind of relationships where you've known people 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that related, it's just extremely valuable. And then they also get better.
Yeah. Yeah. And, pushing one another, providing opportunity, experience, information, one person just can't do it all. So you need kind of a group of people doing these things so that you can have this community that helps, inform and develop one another. Right?
Tell us about your film with the college students on the boat that turns into like a murder everyone gets killed on the boat.
Harpoon.
Harpoon.
Yes.
Love it, Harpoon.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really proud of that movie. So that's written and directed by Rob Grant. I think we've worked together 4 features maybe that he's written and directed. And then he cut Knuckleball and did a bit of cutting on Shadow of God, the one I'm in the middle of post on. He's just a really great director, I think. Great writer and director. He's got a really strong voice and vision. So anyways, he came to me with this script, and he was going to, I think, shoot it in Vancouver on his buddy's boat or something like that. And I was like, well, hold on a second. Let's see if we can sort of, just build this up a little bit. I think the project's worth it. And he's like, yeah, if you want to do that, sure, because he's not a producer. So he's like, if you can figure it out, let me know. I was like, okay, cool. Went through a few revisions to the script, but not much, which is something interesting with the way he writes. What he puts down on page, I think he sits with it for a long time. And then what comes out is usually pretty close to a final draft. There's usually minor revisions, but structurally and character and dialogue is usually pretty close. So you might swap some stuff out, but it's kind of there. Anyways, we shot that in Calgary in the middle of the winter. For the interiors, we built a boat set, and then we went to Belize and shot the exteriors in the middle of winter. It was great.
Why Belize?
There was like we looked at like probably a dozen different places. We were going to shoot in Fiji. We were going to shoot in Hawaii. Looked down the coast of LA and Mexico. Belize, where we could find the place, we could put all the crew we needed to put them up. We could shoot in the same place. We could get the boat we needed, and it cost the right amount of money. So it was just kind of all these things that happened to line up. Whereas in the other places we looked, it didn't quite line up. Like because I wanted to shoot it in Fiji, so I thought that'd be a cool place to go hang out for a month or two. But they turned the film down on moral grounds. They did not like what the character said or did. Not like the violence or the language or whatever.
Yeah, even saying that verbally, when I asked you the question, that could end up getting flagged because I think I said the M word that a bunch of college students got, or the K word, killed and murdered. I don't think you can say on social media anymore.
Oh yeah, who knows, man? I can't keep track of that. That's not my.
This writer director that you're talking about, so he wrote and directed Harpoon, and then also wrote and directed Knuckleball. I thought you directed Knuckleball.
No, he came on and edited that. So usually when I'm directing a movie,
yeah,
if I'm directing a movie, he'll usually help on the edit. When he's writing a movie, I help produce it and he directs it.
That was another good piece of work. That screened at you screened that down in the Beltline at that theater, I believe. Knuckleball screened at there was a screening of Knuckleball at that theater.
Was it Globe?
Globe Cinema, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I liked that piece of work too.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it looks really great, that movie.
Yeah.
And it was fun to work with Michael Ironside and Chambers. And
great lighting in that film, and the art direction and costume design was all really, really fantastic. What can you tell us about this Exorcist movie? I believe I heard you talking on the radio just recently promoting that film.
Oh no, that was a TV series thing I was directing. That dealt with the paranormal, but it was more of a workplace comedy. This one is we shot it in November, December last year. We're just in the final edit right now, about to send it to VFX and sound. It is an Exorcist movie that sort of takes the tropes from what I don't like about exorcism movies, because a lot of them, to me, kind of run along the same very predictable, roads. And this script, when I first read it, I think I got it like 5 years ago or something like that. It's a writer out of Edmonton named Tim Cairo, and him and I have a few other projects that we're working on. Anyways, it was doing something really fresh and new in that genre, which I think is hard to do, and it's not done that often, probably because it is hard to do. So anyways, it's about an exorcist whose dad gets possessed. This is a terrible pitch. Whose dad gets possessed by someone claiming to be God. So all the stuff he's doing as an exorcist that would normally get rid of a demon aren't necessarily working. They feel like they're making it stronger, whatever the thing is. And then he may have to make a deal with the devil to kill God. It's like your normal, regular family stuff.
When can we expect that to be public?
It'll probably do a festival run in the fall, and it's got distribution. It'll be well distributed after that. I think we got I don't know what I can say about that or not, so I don't want to. But we're doing like a 500 theater release in Latin America, for example. We should have an exciting rollout. And I would love to go down to, Argentina or Colombia, go to a theater and watch my movie with hopefully a crowd of people from the city and just check it out. That'll be pretty exciting.
That's a great goal.
Yeah. Those are the kind of goals I tend to create on these types of projects. It's kind of bucket list fun stuff. Because you don't actually get that much. Making a movie is really hard, so you don't actually get that many moments where you can kind of just enjoy it, So you can create sort of those moments along the way. It sure helps.
Well, I enjoyed this conversation. Mike, thanks for coming in today.
Yeah, is that it?
Yeah, that tone, the way in which that just ended.
Yeah.
And then let's do this again.
Okay, yeah. Cool.